Okay, hi everyone. Game Theory is coming out with a brand new, what's the word, Deltarune theory, and I can't wait for it. You know, their last one was probably the worst Deltarune theory I've ever seen, and Deltarune is my favorite game ever made. So I'm gonna try, just telling you everything wrong with Game Theory's Chapter 3 and 4 Deltarune theory. Here we go.
Hello, Internet! Welcome to Game Theory, the show that promises to give the new Pope Leo a copy of Deltarune if given the chance. But if I'm bringing up that dead meme, that can only mean one thing. Deltarune chapters 3 and 4 have finally arrived, and I have been dying to get stuck into these new installments of the story. Have some questions answered from previous chapters, and as always, try to solve the new questions these chapters present. And there is a lot to discuss, my friends.
Okay, I just want to point out Tom here is saying that the only reason why he really not the only reason. Tom here is saying that the biggest reason why he's excited about Deltarune is to try and figure out the story instead of, trying to predict everything instead of, getting attached to these characters. He mentions nothing of the game itself. He just wants to figure out the story, which is a very reductive and, frankly, terrible way to view anything, really. Trying to dissect everything is bad. Undertale tells you this very explicitly if you do multiple runs.
The game. Deltarune, however, works a little bit differently. There aren't multiple paths you can take that lead to different endings. Characters aren't killed, but instead the battles end after a certain amount of damage is made and you spare them.
That's not entirely accurate. It's not. What? Hold on. He said that, characters are spared after you damage them enough. They don't die. But you also don't really do that. In fact, you don't even spare them, you pacify them. But whatever, what do I know? Quite a bit, actually.
The whole theme of this game is that your choices don't matter.
The whole theme of this game is that your choices don't matter. This is such a reductive and bad take. It's not even a take, it's just a misinterpretation, right? Here's the thing. Your choices do matter. This is very evident, alright? You do have a prophecy, but what matters is how you interpret it, or at least how the game, interprets it. How the characters interpret it, right? Susie says your choices don't matter at the beginning of the game. And yeah, sure, the weird second voice in the Goner Maker sequence says your choices don't matter. That's also true, right? But that's two characters saying it independently at the beginning of the game. It's like saying Undertale's message is that, oh, in this world it's kill or be killed because, Flowey told us. Just because it's said by some vague, mysterious mystery man doesn't make it automatically true or canon or accurate, okay? Please, think about this. There is only one ending, currently, that we know of, but that doesn't mean that your choices don't matter. These things matter, okay? In the game. Anyways. Oh my gosh, they're using stretched out footage.
Over the last two chapters, we met Chris, a quiet individual who explores places called the Dark Worlds with former bully Susie. During these adventures, they meet Rolze, a creature from the Dark World who wants Chris to fulfill the legend of the Deltarune.
That's a bit of a lie, currently. That wasn't the prophecy, not in its original state. It was a paraphrased version of what Rolze interpreted the prophecy to be, okay? That's what Rolze thinks the prophecy is, not what the game thinks the prophecy is, right? That's not what the actual prophecy is. Said prophecy is quite a number of times. And also, he explicitly changed the wording of the prophecy, trying to make us and Susie and himself act or do things differently so that way the fate of the prophecy can be avoided because he doesn't like it. So, their destinies are set, they cannot be changed. He was actively trying to do that.
Prophecy was that three heroes, a human, a monster, and a prince from the dark would seal the dark fountains and banish the angels' heaven. Again, highlighting the idea that their destinies are set. They cannot be changed. The fountain is formed at the church nearby. Susie and Chris enter and begin to learn about the prophecy of the Deltarune. Once again, Chris seals the dark fountain after going up against the roaring knight and the titan that they summon. A sign of the roaring that is to come.
Okay, the first 6 minutes of this video is just explaining everything, and also sponsor, and also the intro. Whatever. This is fine-ish. I can't fault them for doing this.
And is able to exist inside the bunker, implying that this knight isn't a darkener, but a lightener like Chris and Susie that is able to exist in both worlds.
Another minute is just dedicated to explaining that the knight is a lightener, which you could discern by just playing Chapter 3.
And weirdly, that she's left-handed, based on her mouse being on the left side of her computer.
Here we go, that's the not correct part. The knight is ambidextrous. They literally summon it in their right hand initially, right?
It plays a song called FindHer.ogg. This musical motif is also present in the Roaring Knights theme song.
It's not in there. That's more accurately described as the chase motif. Also, it's in, what's the word? Raise up your bat. So, do with that what you will.
When Chris actually looks at this guitar in Chapter 4, what do they find? The code to the bunker. The code to the bunker that the Roaring Knight is hiding in is inside Dessa's guitar.
Yeah, dude, the code. The singular code. Definitely, yep. There's only one code, and we are going to ignore every other, potential code. Because it doesn't matter at all, It doesn't matter that there's 3 symbols with 3, keypads in them, Doesn't matter. Reading the game is for, chumps. You know what I mean? It's for chumps. Reading is for chumps. Gosh.
A girl that wears a gown has been a member of the hero's party, and when you combine her ring of thorns that you get from her special root with a pure crystal, you get an item called the Twisted Sword. Guys, it's Noelle.
Okay, this is one of the bigger parts of the video that I hate. You know who else doesn't actually use a sword? Noelle, technically. Not yet, at least. You know what else that thing doesn't have? Antlers. It's not Noelle, so it can't be Noelle, just saying. And also, it says, the girl with hope crossed on her heart, and Noelle is depressed and suicidal, chat. Come on now! Oh, me when I have to ignore the characters and what they believe in and what they think to make my bad theory work. Like, it's so bad. Wrong hero theory is interesting, right? But the fact that it's presented as fact in this thing is so terrible. Also,
Plus, when Susie attempts to open the Dark Fountain later in the chapter, all the colors were wrong. Things aren't exactly the same as the real Dark World, because though Susie knows how to open a Dark Fountain, she isn't the real hero spoken of in the prophecy. Susie is simply believing it must be her because Rolse told her that she was the second hero back in the first chapter. But if I'm saying that's wrong, that Susie isn't the second hero,
but if I'm saying that's wrong, you are wrong. You're incorrect. Rolse, it's not because she isn't the hero, it's because Dark Worlds, Dark Fountains, they manifest due to what the person who, created them wants, right? Chris and the Knight are working towards the same goal, so they have a very similar Dark World, right? Susie has a different goal when creating that Dark Fountain, right? She just wants to use it to open the other one, to find the code, right? That's what she wants. So her Dark Fountain is different to reflect that, and Rolse tells us this. He says, Susie, the reason why Gerson was different is because you didn't know him. He's a Dustner, as we call him in the fan base. And so, you just don't know him, therefore you can't create him in your Dark World.
Noelle has become a more significant character as the chapters have gone on.
A more significant character, and the only time that her most significant outing is in Chapter 2, which, come on now, please pay attention to the game first before you start making a theory.
Taking on the Snowgrave route in Chapter 2.
Also calling it the Snowgrave route when it's called the Weird Route in the files, also called Side B in the files, and also, another thing, Susie saying, things just took a weird route right now. Like, that was basically the nail in the coffin for calling this thing Snowgrave route, which just, gosh, anyways.
We'll call the girl who snows, which is referring to what we literally do during the Spamton Neophyte. We call on Noelle's name, and she is summoned, killing Spamton with her ice magic.
Who will call the girl who snows? This has new meaning in, Chapter 5, because you know who calls Noelle? Her mother. When Rudy took a big fall, right?
The image here is the same as the second hero, but it has a heart like ours inside it. After trying to find the bunker code in the old guitar, Chris pulls out the heart and stuffs it into a drawer.
Do you mean a soul? Because you wouldn't be calling it a heart. Seriously, I think just calling it a heart instead of a soul is like that is LARPer behavior, dude. Are you kidding me?
Snowgrave Root is the canon series of events.
That is not a theory. He's stating it as if it's fact when it is now objectively not. Also, like, oh, it's canon because it just is, you know. It happened, right? So it happened, so it's canon. You know what else happened? Fucking none of that, right? None of that happening is also canon. Yeah, like, gosh.
Even though it felt like it was a decision we were able to make, Toby Fox is once again showing us that it was destined to be.
Yeah, nothing says destined to be quite like, you know, actively going out of your way to start doing a creepypasta version of your own game. Or at least doing a creepypasta version of the game. Yeah, no, it was destined to be. If you play the game normally, then you miss out on the actual canon ending. But, you know, if you do all this weird shit that doesn't make any fucking sense, yeah, no, it's fucking canon now. Yep, this is what Toby intended, guys. Trust me, alright? Toby told me in his dream, right? I was playing multiplayer with Toby in his fever dream. I saw the ending. Noelle started killing some monsters, you know. And Sand showed up and he said, I remember your genocides, right?
This is also why the Night Death is trying to bring about the roaring.
Also, Death being the Night isn't canon yet. It could still be fucking Rudy. Matter of fact, there's like a little more evidence for Rudy Knight because, yeah, whatever.
The roaring is what will summon the heroes and force them to banish the angels' heaven, banish us. Just like Chris, they want us gone so that their sister is left alone and safe, which explains why we see both of those characters working together throughout the chapters.
Saying, yes, now, the reason why Chris and the Roaring Knight are working together is because the Roaring Knight wants Chris to stay away from their sister. You know what I mean? Yeah, no, I don't know what you mean, because you're just making shit up at this point. No, look, okay. That argument, so that way, Chris and the Knight can bring about the roaring, so that way Chris can stay away from Noelle, falls apart because Chris also doesn't do anything with Noelle if you just don't do the weird route. And in that case, why does the Roaring Knight do anything, huh?
But they also clearly hate what we are doing to Noelle, putting us in a trash can and kicking the living daylights out of us after we put the thorn ring back on her finger.
Okay, so theory is that Snowgrave is real, Noelle is the true girl in the thing, and the prophecy isn't real, and that the Snowgrave route is the canon route, and also the reason why Chris is the reason why Chris acts like that is because they are trying to bring about the roaring and stop us from being with Noelle, which already happens if you don't do the weird route.
On the door is the Deltarune symbol, but it's slightly different to what you might remember. It's pretty hard to see because, well, it's 8-bit, but the symbol actually has 4 triangles on it instead of the usual 3.
That's a keyhole. That's just a keyhole. Gosh, this guy is missing the forest for the trees.
First the vessel, second the girl, third the prince, and then last is another girl. There are 2 separate girls in this prophecy. And if you look into the game files, the image used behind the final girl is labeled Rude Buster.
Okay, that's just not particularly true. There's 2 separate girls in the prophecy. Well, no, it could be the same girl. Come on now. Like, please, let's use our brain here. The second hero, the girl with hope crossed on her heart. This is most likely Susie because, well, firstly, no antlers, and also Noelle is depressed. And last was the girl, at last was the girl. Like, this can also be Susie. It does not necessarily, like, make it out to be explicitly, totally, only, definitely 2 separate people, right? At last was the girl, at last was the girl with hope crossed on her heart. These 2 things can be the same thing, right? That's Susie's Rude Buster, and the only person who fucking has any hope in the entire goddamn game is Susie, alright? Hope crossed on her heart. I guess, technically, Noelle can have some amount of hope in the weird route. but like, I don't know. The fact that we didn't see the Flower Man trapped in asylum probably means that the Weird Route did break the prophecy. Also, going back to the Snowgrave route is the canon route. In the Snowgrave route, during the Irem Snow Sword route thing, the game says the Faerun path began with ice magic, which, hey, would you look at that? This weird path starting with ice magic? Crazy. And during that part where Susie, punches the final prophecy glass thing, well, second to final, Ralsei will say, I've been trying to avoid this the entire time. I've been trying to avoid that thing happening by being, a liar and a keeper of secrets, like Rasil from, Judaist theology. Anyways, in the Weird Route, he says, I've been trying to avoid this. I've been trying to be the keeper of secrets and lying to you all, like, Rasil in the, Judaist theology. But what if it's worse? What if changing our fate somehow brings upon a worse outcome? This is only in the Weird Route. Hey, I'd just like to point out the whole, thing about the old man, the whole, deal with him saying,
Oh, well, you kids can make your own path. My book is just an interpretation of the prophecy, and Dragon Blazer is just an interpretation of the prophecy. You kids got the freedom to do whatever you like. You are hopeful creatures, I'm old.
He says, you guys are chill, you guys are cool to do whatever you want. I believe in you, right? He says that. He says, you guys may not be able to change the prophecy, but you will most likely be able to change what happens in it, per se, right? You can't change the wording, but you can interpret it as something else. Which is something that we see with the prophecy, right? We got the Queen's Chariot cannot be stopped, and this probably means, Queen's Fists being detachable and, unstoppable, right? That's probably what that means. I doubt it would be the, literal Queen card that gets stopped. So, yeah, things being up to interpretation with the prophecy happens a lot. And yeah, sure, a lot of literal things happen, but a lot of literal things also don't happen. Yes, Jockington grows the beard. Yes, the toothpaste boy being called that by a pointy-headed boy did happen, literally. But the Flower Man trapped in asylum, we all thought that was gonna be Asgore. Nope, it was Flowery. Flowery is the Flower Man that's trapped in asylum, helping Asgore, and he just can't. He's trapped in asylum. Harg. Anyways.
But the real reason he's acting so strange, I suspect, is because Ralsei knows of Susie's fate.
It's kind of correct. He did absolutely jump the gun with some other stuff, right? He never even mentioned the night, and me personally, I like to think that as he just didn't think the night was that important. He probably thought it was going to be something else. So when he, reveals the prophecy, the initial prophecy to Susie and Chris, he just says, oh, we gotta banish the angels, heaven, and stuff, ha ha ha. And later on, when King is like,
tonight, let me have all this power, and I'm gonna kill you children.
He's like, oh no, I didn't bring up the night. Gosh darn it, that was on the test. I'll bring it up, later or something. I can't bring it up now. God damn it. That's what I think happened.
And actually, Noelle growing in her levels of violence leads me to believe that we, the players, are growing her powers in order that during the final battle, the angelic-looking Noelle will become the perfect vessel for us to use in order to control everything and everyone. But I also believe Susie, despite not being one of the main three, is the one that's going to save Noelle, and in the end, the entire world.
Okay, there's a minor problem with this. Yo, anybody got Chapter 7 Side B? When does that come out? Because I don't think Susie's gonna be here for long. Oh, that entire part where Susie, Lee saying Susie will definitely save Noelle. On Gaster's name, I was playing. Oh my gosh.
which leads to Chris, for a brief moment, gaining back control and playing without our input.
I mean, Chris can also just take control whenever, right? It's not even like it's harder when we're there, but like, Chris has been shown to just act on their own volition before. You know, like in every cutscene they move in, that's them acting on their own volition.
And then, when all hope is lost for the tale, the final tragedy unveils. To save the world, there is only one way. The girl's death breaks the angel's sway. Only then will the worlds be saved.
Oh my god, here, have something better. The girls break up and are no longer gay. Only then will the worlds be saved. There's your super cool thing. Yep, that's totally canon. Toby told me in his dream. Punzel was there and so was Bluey, dude. Trust, alright?
Although it would also mean her losing one of the character traits that makes her so unique. Susie is constantly defiant, attacking when we don't tell her to, moving around without our inputs. But if she does sacrifice herself for the good of the world, then she's just like Chris, the Knight, Noelle, or I'll say even us, who are just following a set path that Toby Fox has pre-planned. Then again, I suppose that's kind of been the point from the start, hasn't it?
I mean, Susie's defiance, her rudeness, is like a big part of the prophecy, right? I'm gonna link to a great theory by, I forget the person, but it basically says, yeah, no, Susie's gonna change the prophecy by being so rude and epic all the time, you know? It feeds into wrong hero theory, but actually makes it into something hopeful and good for Susie, instead of just being like, sorry, Suze, you got picked last again. Better luck next time, you know?
But hey, that's just a theory. A game theory! Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching. Yeah, can I get money back from this? I don't want this. This is actual trash. It's just a theory, a game theory. Next time you should base your theory in evidence. I don't know. Alright, see ya.